At some point in your retirement journey, there'll probably be at least one bear market. It's much worse if this happens at the beginning of your retirement rather than the middle or the end. When you take money out of your retirement portfolio during a bear market, it destroys your principal and permanently reduces your compound growth. The bucket strategy can be used as a defense when you retire. The retirement bucket strategy is an investment approach that separates your income into 3 buckets. Each of these buckets has a specific purpose based on when you need the income. Bucket number 1 is immediate, short-term, no-risk cash. Bucket number 2 is intermediate, mid-term, and low-risk. Bucket number 3 is long-term and more risk. I have a video that goes into more detail about this that I'll link below in case you're interested. You want to fill bucket number 1 before you retire. The risk is too big to assume you'll be able to do this after you retire. People argue that keeping 3 to 4 years of cash means losing opportunities, and that is true. But cash doesn't mean it's not making any interest. Currently in my bucket number 1, my high yield savings is making 5% and my I-bonds are making 4%. I think the real value of the cash bucket is as an insurance policy against market downturns. Sequence of return risk is real. It's the risk of negative market returns occurring early in your retirement. Defending against it should be a big part of your withdrawal strategy. Once a bear market hits, you don't have to panic. You have 3 to 4 years of cash set aside. So you should have enough to avoid selling stocks before a recovery. 4 to 6 times a year I'll look at my buckets. So for example, if bucket number 1 has dropped below 10%, I'll need to top it off. I mentioned in a previous video the Retirement Manifesto's bucket spreadsheet that I'll link below again. But if I look at my buckets when the market is down, I need to wait before refilling my buckets. If a bear market lasts for several years and I run out of money in bucket number 1, I may have to dip into bucket number 2. If you have 3 to 4 years of living expenses saved in number 1, it's unlikely that this would happen. Not impossible, but unlikely. If somehow a down market lasted more than 4 years, that's what bucket 2 is for. That's why it's not as aggressive as bucket number 3. So after a down market, as soon as the market has come back and funds have recovered, then I'll refill my buckets and top them off. So I'll look at my buckets 4 to 6 times a year, but I won't always do anything. It's just to check on them and make sure they're balanced. Using the bucket strategy allows me to have more aggressive funds in bucket 3 without having a panic attack. If you've watched my videos before, you probably know I'm a big scaredy cat when it comes to market volatility. But bucket number 3 is where you can make the good returns. So I'll check on my buckets. If the market's down, I won't do anything. If the market's up, I'll move funds around and top off my buckets. For me personally, being a nervous Nelly with market volatility, the bucket strategy works for me and allows me to sleep at night. Here's an example of the bucket strategy in just a random market scenario, just so you can see how it works. This is totally random and just for explanation purposes. Let's say you retire at the beginning of 2025 with $500,000. Say you have $64,000 in bucket number 1, $136,000 in bucket number 2, and $300,000 in bucket number 3. Also say you need to pull $16,000 a year out to live on. Maybe you have Social Security, a pension, a side gig, or some other sources of income to supplement that. I'm not going to include taxes or inflation because this is just for discussion purposes. So let's just say 2025 ended with the market up 10%. Yay! You pull that $16,000 you need out of bucket 1. Now you want to transfer $16,000 from bucket 2 to bucket 1 since the market was up and you can. And to keep things balanced, let's maybe transfer $10,000 from bucket 3 to bucket 2. If the market was up 10%, bucket 3 could have increased by 10%. Bucket 2, because it's more conservative, may have only increased by, let's say, 8%. Now you're starting 2026 with $64,000 in bucket 1 again, $880 in bucket 2, and $320,000 in bucket 3. Just for fun, let's say 2026 ended the year up 20%. Wow! You'll pull that $16,000 you need again out of bucket 1. Now you want to transfer that $16,000 from bucket 2 to bucket 1 because the market was up and you can. And to keep things balanced again, let's transfer $10,000 from bucket 3 to bucket 2. If the market was really up 20%, bucket number 3 could have increased by 20%. Bucket 2, because it's more conservative, let's just say it increased by 18%. Again, this is just random. Now you're starting 2027 with $64,000 in bucket 1 again, $160,238 in bucket 2, and $374,000 in bucket 3. Wow, that was a good pretend year in the market. Let's pretend 2027 ended the year just 5% up. You pull that $16,000 you need out of bucket 1. Now you want to transfer $16,000 from bucket 2 to bucket 1 since the market was up and you can. And to keep things balanced, this time let's transfer $30,000 from bucket 3 to bucket 2. We maybe should have done that in the previous year, but it's too late now. If the market was up 5%, bucket 3 could have increased by 5%, but bucket 2, because it's more conservative, may have only increased by 3%. So now you're starting 2028 with $64,000 in bucket 1 again, $179,045 in bucket 2, and $362,700 in bucket 3. Pretty good. Now let's pretend 2028 ended with a down market, down 5%. Darn. You still need to pull that $16,000 from bucket number 1 that you need to live on. Then you do nothing. No transfers since the market was down. If the market was down by 5%, bucket number 3 could have decreased by 5%. Bucket number 2, being more conservative, may have only decreased by, say, 3%. Now you're starting 2029 with only $48,000 in bucket number 1, $173,673 in bucket 2, and $344,565 in bucket 3. Not terrible. Now let's pretend 2029 ended with the stock market down 10%. Yuck. You still need to pull that $16,000 from bucket 1 to live on. But then you do nothing again. No transfer since the market is down. If the market was down 10%, bucket number 3 could decrease by 10%. Bucket number 2, because it's more conservative, may have only decreased by, say, 8%. Now you're starting 2030 with $32,000 in bucket number 1. You have $159,779 in bucket 2, and you have $310,108 in bucket 3. I could keep going, but it would just take too long. So after 5 years of pulling $16,000 a year, starting with a bull market, and that part's important, you have $501,887 in your retirement portfolio when you started with $500,000. Now, if your retirement started with a bear market, it would not look this good. I'm not going to go through this one step by step to save time. But you can see that in this scenario, after 5 years of pulling $16,000 a year, starting with a bear market, You have $407,050 left when you started with $500,000. I just want to remind you, I'm not a financial advisor. You should talk to your own financial advisor before investing. Personally, I really like the bucket strategy. It's a simple method. The intent is to alleviate sequence of return risk by not having to sell stocks in a down market. You can use your cash bucket to fund retirement expenses so that stocks have a chance to rebound after a bear market. It takes the fear out of managing your own investments and avoids selling during a down market. I hope this helps explain the bucket strategy a little bit. It took me a while to fully understand it and really appreciate it. Some love it, some don't. For me, it helps me sleep at night. If you're seeing me for the first time, hi, I'm Julie and this channel's Happy on Monday. Thanks for joining me. If you found this helpful, please like. And if you're interested in early retirement, consider subscribing. I'm going to leave you with the quote. The pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change. The realist adjusts the sails. Hope to see you again soon.